Dave Giffen is the executive director of the Coalition for the Homeless. You know, I was going to ask you if homelessness is getting worse, but then I read your report, which startled me, and it said that almost 195,000 people used the Department of Homeless Services during 2025. And I was astonished by that number. That's an increase, is it not?
It's a big increase, and it's the most that we've seen since the crisis of mass homelessness began in New York City about 50 years ago. And just over the 4 years of the Adams administration, we saw about a 27% increase in the number of people using the shelter system each night. But why?
I mean, is this because of the asylum seekers? Is this what is fueling the fact that so many people can't find housing?
Well, the asylum seeker issue is an interesting one, but we actually pulled those numbers out and looked only at what we refer to as longer-term New Yorkers and how homelessness has been increasing among that population. And the problem is that the city has been failing to actually address the underlying causes of mass homelessness.
Which is?
The lack of affordable housing. And, you know, interestingly, over those 4 years of the Adams administration, DSS, the Department of Social Services, did a better job of placing people into permanent housing from the shelter system. So more people left shelters, but still the total number went up because more New Yorkers are falling into homelessness every day.
But as the numbers increased, was that an increase because people couldn't afford the rent, or was it also exacerbated by the fact that we also, during the Adams administration, had a huge influx of asylum seekers?
Well, again, we count those numbers separately, and the number of asylum seekers was huge for a while, but then has been going down fairly steadily.
But they were looking for permanent housing too.
They're looking for permanent housing too, and they need help as well. And there's still thousands of asylum seekers in shelters that need help finding housing and jobs and getting their immigration status dealt with. But even apart from the asylum seekers, the number of longer-term New Yorkers that were losing their homes kept increasing because there's simply no housing for them. They can't afford to pay rents in New York.
So was it increasing costs not only of rent, but food and fuel and all the other things that were adding to the inaffordability to stay in a home?
Exactly right.
Or was it the decrease in the amount of options that you have to live where you could live?
I mean, the cost of housing in New York City is obviously the biggest driver of poverty in New York City. It's the single largest expense that any household has. But all of those other costs contribute to the inability of a family to pay rent.
But let's ask this question. I know it's going to be politically difficult, but it seems to me that administration after administration, including the present administration especially, they focus on affordable housing for the working class. But I think that leaves out homeless people, people in shelter. And so are we directing our money and our ability to build housing to a smaller group of people than we need to? Does it need to be expanded? And if so, how do we do that?
Well, Marcia, you identified really what the core of the problem is. And, we all agree that New York has huge affordability problems that impact everybody who works here. But there is no way to talk about affordability without talking about housing, and there is no way to talk about affordability in housing without talking about the people most impacted by that, which are the roughly 350,000 people tonight are without homes in New York City. That's insane. And the only way to address that is to put city and state resources into creating more housing for those people. So the working class New Yorkers need housing, absolutely, but they're in housing. What about all of those hundreds of thousands of people who have no housing tonight?
But why does the city focus on the working class and not look at the people who are in shelters? I mean, when you see the number, it's almost 200,000 people used the shelter system last year.
Yes.
Wouldn't you try to find housing for them as well? I mean, a rent freeze doesn't affect the people who are living in shelter.
Exactly right. And we want to engage in every kind of prevention technique we can. So rent freeze is good, helping people with to pay off their rent arrears and to stay into their homes, absolutely. But I wouldn't say we need to help those people as well. I would say we need to help those people first. That needs to be the priority. Help the people who are in most need.
How do you change that? How do you get the government to change that?
I wish I could give you an easy answer to that, but we try to call the scope of the problem to the attention of city officials and to get them to focus resources where they're most needed.
So we have been talking about the City FEPS program and the fact that this is a housing voucher program that gives money to people so that they can find housing. And the point that you and housing homeless advocates like Christine Quinn have made is that it's so much cheaper to give them a voucher than to put them in a shelter. So if that's the case, why don't you expand the program more? And why was it so hard to get the administration to increase it to include another 30,000 people?
The administration said that it was an issue of dollars and cents, that they didn't have the money to do it. But I would counter that saying, look, ultimately, it's what is the priority of the city. Childcare was a stated priority of the city, and they found the billions of dollars to deal with that. There's proof of concept right there that if something is a priority, you can find a way to do it. So we just need to make homelessness more of a priority for the current administration.
But if the numbers are very simple, $54 a night for a voucher and 200 something to stay a night in a shelter, it doesn't make sense not to do the voucher. I mean, it doesn't make fiscal sense to me. Maybe I'm wrong. What am I not seeing?
You're seeing it. It doesn't make sense not to do it. The shelter costs are there because there is a legal right to shelter in New York City. So the city is legally compelled to provide shelter for every homeless individual and family who doesn't have a home. That is a good thing. We don't want anyone to be on the streets. So the city does not have a choice. They have to spend that money. But we don't want the city to spend all this money on shelters. We would rather see the shelter population going down by providing more people with city FEPS and by building more housing.
But homeless people are not simply people who live in shelters. They're people who live on the street as well. And under the HOPE report, there were 4,991 people on the street the day they did the report.
Yeah, no, that is a huge portion of the crisis as well. And I'll say that that number is a terrific undercount. There's far more people who are unsheltered in New York City. They're just not able to count them. But it's not that we don't have a solution for individuals like that. Supportive housing, which is permanent housing with on-site social services, is a great solution for that population. But again, it's not adequately funded and it's not adequately run.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But our conversations continue right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. We are back with Dave Giffen, and I have a question for you. What do you think would have more impact on the on the homeless population? Building more housing, expanding rental assistance, or increasing mental health services?
Well, all of those things are needed, but ultimately we have a real supply crisis in New York City. More housing has to be built. You know, we have something like 15,000 households in the shelter system that have been approved for rent vouchers, but they have nowhere to use them because there's just not enough housing stock right now. So we need to more efficiently use the resources that we do have. There's also 6,000 empty public housing units. There's 5,000 empty supportive housing units.
Why aren't we using them?
Because the city needs to fix those units up. They need capital work.
How long does it take to fix them? I mean, that seems that you could do it faster than building a whole new building.
Absolutely, and that is one of the priorities, and the city has identified those as priorities as well, but it hasn't happened yet, and we need to see that happen. But they need to use every tool at their disposal. Even if they use every tool at their disposal right now, there's just simply not enough housing that's affordable to extremely low-income and homeless New Yorkers.
I mean, it takes a while to build a new building. I mean, you have to go through the approval process, you have to get people to actually do it, and then it takes time to actually put the building up. So you're talking years before you can increase the housing stock. So what's the short-term solution?
Well, I would say to that first, there's an old saying of what's the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago? What's the second best time to plant a tree today? You know, Ed Koch was mayor when I started at the Coalition for the Homeless.
Oh, my God.
Right. Been doing this a long time. And the argument that we shouldn't invest in housing because it takes a long time for it to come online, it does take a long time, but we need to do it because this problem isn't going away tomorrow. right now, what we need to do is use the resources that we do have and use them more efficiently, and that's the empty units I was talking about in city FEPs.
So I have to ask you a question that is controversial, and that is, what should we do about the encampments that we see on the street? The Adams administration had a program of tearing the encampments down. The mayor, a current mayor, said he wasn't going to do that, but then when he was faced with encampments, when he first took office, he changed his position and started tearing them down. What should be done about these people who build almost little villages on the streets with, furniture and cooking and things like that?
Nobody wants to live on the streets in a cardboard box. Nobody. And
yet they do.
Because they have no better option right now. And the best approach to this is to engage those individuals and help them move into housing. The housing first approach does in fact work. New York City doesn't have effectively any housing first apartments right now. That's when you find someone on the streets.
But when you go to the people on the street, their option is to go to a shelter. It's not to go into an apartment that could help them.
That's exactly the problem. Most of the individuals on the streets have been in the shelter system, and they found that it didn't meet their needs, and that's why they're ending up on the streets.
They choose to live on the streets.
I wouldn't say they choose to live on the streets. I would say they don't have a better option. They don't want to be on the streets, but if the only other option is to be in a large congregate shelter, they often feel like they have more respect and more safety on the streets than they do in those shelters.
So what should the city obligation be to people that they see living on the streets? And some of them are living there during blizzards and freezing, frigid conditions or heat, none of which is healthy.
No, and that's why there is a legal right to shelter in New York City. But for those individuals, here's one thing the city could do. Of the 5,000 empty supportive housing units, take 2,000 of those and say those are dedicated specifically for 2,000 people who are currently sleeping unsheltered on the streets, and just move them in. And that's been done before. It was done 10 years ago with homeless vets, and it worked.
So how come we're not doing it now?
I don't know why we're not doing it. We should be doing it now. This should be a #1 priority of the Mamdani administration.
Well, there's also an increase of people living on the subways. So what should be done about that?
It's the same thing. Those individuals, too, they do need mental health care. But, we have clients, unhoused people who we serve at the Coalition for the Homeless who need mental health care. And to get them connected with one of those mobile mental health care teams can take over a year.
Why?
Because there are not enough of those teams. It's not adequately funded.
But each time we ask the mayor about it, he says we're putting more people in outreach. I mean, during the last heat wave, he said we have 600 outreach teams, 600 people in outreach teams that are going out to talk to people. That seems like a big number, but is it?
Well, for one, that's just during the Code Blue or the Code Red, where they get those kinds of numbers going out. But those aren't mobile mental health care teams. Those are staff that are going out there to tell people where they can come to get out of the cold and out of the heat, which is a good thing. But there are people that do have mental health diagnoses out on the street who want and need mental health care, but there's just not enough mental health care for those individuals right now. But we could serve them by moving them directly into supportive housing.
If we had it.
Yeah, and we do. We have it. They should move them into 2,000 units.
So last question I have is this. We have had, in the last 6 months, weather extremes. We have had blizzards, frigid conditions where I personally did stories about homeless people who died just sitting in a bench. We had heat, which, the shelters didn't have air conditioning. We have floods. What should the city be doing? I know that they're trying to tailor what they do with these climate changes, but what should they be doing specifically for homeless people?
Get them into housing. I mean, I hate to be reductionist about it. It is the answer to everything because it is the answer to this problem, and they can do it. It's not that we don't know the solutions to this, right? It's just that we're not doing it. We're not adequately funding it. They should be moving people wholesale out of shelters and into permanent housing. They should be moving people from the streets into supportive housing. The city's response during the heat wave and during that cold spell was actually pretty good. You know, they did put a lot of resources out there, and they used some very creative solutions. And they should get credit for the work that they did. I think they did save lives. But those individuals should not have been out on the streets in the first place.
So should Albany, I mean, you talk about the need for housing. Should Albany be doing more? Should the federal government be doing more to help the city with the homeless crisis?
Absolutely. I mean, this is really hard to do alone. The state can do a lot. The state provides something called the public assistance rent allowance for people on public assistance to pay rent. For a single adult, that's $215 a month. Now, if you can find an apartment for $215 a month in New York City, please tell me. The state needs to raise those levels of rent allowance to meet fair market rent. The state can be helping much more than it is now. It also offloaded most of the cost of the shelter system onto New York City. The state absolutely needs to step up and do much more. It
seems that there's not enough of a lobbying effort on the part of the homeless people to try to force the legislature to do the right thing.
No, politically it's always a difficult topic because, as you pointed out before, it's going to take years to solve this problem. So politicians are always wary to promise anything that they're not going to immediately reap the benefits of. So, you know, we're always trying to convince them it is in the interest of that elected official, but they should be doing it because it's in the human interest of all of the hundreds of thousands of people who are suffering because of homelessness.
Dave Giffen, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you at home for joining me as well.